specific person inspired me to go to university. Where I grew up in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, and I grew up in a fairly affluent suburb, and it was pretty much the expectation that everybody goes to university. I think my graduating class was maybe 106 students, and I think maybe 2 people didn't go to university. I mean, a fair few people subsequently didn't finish university, but definitely going to university wasn't something that was ever presented to me as an option. I don't think at any point in my childhood or growing up I thought I wouldn't go to university. Both of my parents have been to university. My father actually has a doctorate. My mother also has advanced degrees in education, so it was always something that was presented as normal. And I have an older brother as well who went to a very good university, so it was never something that I thought I wouldn't do. And I did really well in secondary school. I was always at the top of my class, so it was just expected that I'd go to a very good university. I think that I assumed that it would be just like high school. Like in high school, I always got the absolute top marks with very, very little effort. And I think I thought it would be like that, but it was actually a lot harder. The volume of work at university was a lot more than at high school. And I think also just having to be responsible for yourself in a certain way. So if you have a 9 a.m. lecture, well, you have to go to that 9 a.m. lecture. Nobody's going to notice if you're not there. And if you don't go, you're the one who's going to have to kind of figure out how to catch up. I think the amount of work was a lot more than I thought it would be. I think the idea as well of not quite knowing what I wanted to do, because I think that I kind of thought that when I got to college, I would have a really good idea of what I wanted to major in quite quickly and that those things would be sorted, but it actually took me about 2 years to figure out what I wanted to major in. So I took a lot of classes in random departments doing different things. So I think that that was really different than I thought it would be. It was a huge change from school, I think. And I think just the idea that, you take a class in something that you think you're going to be really interested in, and then you discover, actually, this isn't what interests me at all. I'm finding this actually quite boring, was difficult to deal with at first. So I should probably explain what I was studying, because that was a big part of it. So for my undergrad, I did a degree called Symbolic Systems, which is essentially cognitive sciences. It was a mixture of analytic philosophy, computer science, cognitive psychology, and linguistics. And I mostly was focusing on computer science and analytic philosophy. And to be honest, I think a big reason why I did that course was because of getting kind of swept up in this whole Silicon Valley thing. And I wasn't bad at it. I was good. I wasn't great, but I was good at it, especially the philosophy side I really enjoyed. But the actual computer science stuff, which is very mathematical and very kind of techy, I did well at while not really enjoying it. And I definitely felt like a sense by the end that this wasn't really a great degree for me to be doing, that I wasn't really interested in becoming an engineer or working in web development or doing any of those sorts of things that most people with that degree go on to do. And so I was speaking with a friend of mine who was actually doing the same degree, but he focused much more on linguistics, and he had decided to do this thing that they offered at our university called co-terming, which is where in your final year, if you have enough credits, if you're close enough to being finished with your first degree, you can immediately go on and do your second degree, so do a master's degree, and so a lot of people would do it in the 5th year. I did it in my 4th year because I think I only had 1 class left for my undergraduate for my 4th year. And so he told me about this program that he was doing called Modern Thought and Literature, which was basically continental philosophy and European thought, and it just sounded super exciting to me. And I thought, oh, well, if he did Symbolic Systems and then co-termed in Modern Thought and Literature, maybe I can do it. It turned out he was the first person to ever do this particular pattern. But so I thought, well, maybe I'll just see. So I applied to take this co-term, and I got in. And I was encouraged by some of my philosophy professors in particular. There was one woman in particular called Crystal Lawler who taught me in this class on epistemology, and they were like, no, this is something you'd be really good at. And I ended up loving it, and that was kind of when I rediscovered that I actually like study and that I actually like academics. Because by the end of my first degree, I kind of was feeling very uninterested in the whole thing. So having the kind of encouragement from my friend, but also from some of my professors. And when I started that course, the first class that I took was on existentialism. And it was with a professor called Lanier Anderson, who's still at Stanford. And he had actually taught me in a course on my first year that had been on Nietzsche and Plato and art. It's one of those kind of freshman requirement, large-scale humanities courses that everybody at Stanford has to take. And I found him to be a really inspiring teacher just because he was so passionate about what he was doing. And this existentialism class was just amazing. I mean, the things we were reading were amazing. And this professor of mine had been an activist. He was from Georgia originally and had been an activist in the civil rights movement and had a family history of this. And the whole thing was just so much more inspiring to me. And I think that's when I got really interested in my studies again and going back to it. I mean, my grades were a mixed bag for my undergrad, I'm not gonna lie about that. You know, they were mostly good, not great. Like, they weren't first class grades. They were probably solid 2-1 grades. And I think it was a mix of aptitude and just, you know, just doing the work, but without a whole lot of passion or interest. I mean, I didn't start getting amazing grades until I did that first master's degree, where suddenly I was getting like A+ and, you know, first classes consistently. But to me, that was the difference between being interested and wanting to do extra versus just kind of going through the motions to get an okay degree and kind of finish and get out of there. Actually, I think it's important to try out things even when they don't work, and I think sometimes trying out something and discovering that actually this isn't for me is a lot more useful. I think it's important to try different disciplines, to try different ways of thinking, to try different things out. So I don't regret it in that sense. I think I actually learned a lot about myself from doing a degree that I didn't actually really enjoy that much ultimately. And I think that it was worthwhile in that way. I mean, I don't know that there's anything that could have been done to change it. I think that part of it is just that, you know, when you're 18 years old, it's really hard. You're still figuring out who you are, so it's really hard to think that way. And for me, after my first master's degree, I actually took about 6 years off before I did another master's degree, and it was only then that I did my PhD. So even then, it still took a while to decide that I wanted to go back and do things. And I think just trying different stuff and experimenting and realizing that, well, the fact that I didn't get a first-class degree or a first-class mark, or, well, the fact that I didn't actually really enjoy it doesn't mean it's over forever. You can still try to do something else. You can still change your mind, and you can think about, well, what about that didn't I enjoy? What about that wasn't really useful for me? After I finished, so the master's degree that I was doing was very intensive. It was extremely draining. It was a ton of work. And really, I should have probably done it over 2 years, which is what a couple other people did. And it's a bit more common in America for masters to stretch out over 2 years. But I did it in the 1 year, so it was really intense. And I knew by the end that while I was interested in the idea of eventually going back to school, I didn't want to do it right away. I felt incredibly burnt out and drained and just kind of ready for a break. So I got a job first in France through the Assistance in France program. So I was, it's called an assistant d'anglais. So I worked in a high school in French, basically assisting the language teachers from the perspective of a native speaker. And I thought that I would do that for a year and then apply to go back to school and then start school again. But then that year was kind of drawing to a close, and it was a time for applications to go in, and I thought, yeah, still don't want to, still don't feel ready to go back. So I ended up going to Prague, where I got a CELTA certification, so a certification in teaching English as a foreign language. And I worked there for a year. And again, I thought, well, after this year, I'll go back to school and, you know, get sorted out again. And then that year was kind of coming to an end, and I thought, yeah, no, I don't think so. And then I got this job opportunity in India, so I decided to go there for a couple of years. And when I was in India, I actually met my current partner. And again, I thought, well, and so India was kind of where I started to think more seriously about going back to school. And right around the end of my time there, I enrolled on a distance MA through the University of Nottingham. And so I started to do that, but then I still didn't go back to school full time. I went to Beijing instead to teach English literature at a Chinese high school. And that was when I was like, okay, I'm definitely ready to go back now. So it was a lot of traveling and doing different things and trying out different careers and just trying to get some experience that wasn't necessarily academic, but more about seeing the world and meeting people and just exploring things. Yeah, definitely. So there's this one class that I had to take. I still remember the unit code. It was Philosophy 160A, and it was cross-listed in math. And it was basically this advanced logic course, and it was a requirement for my major, so I had to take it. And it also happened to be the last course I took for that major, so it was the only undergrad course I took in my 4th year. And it started out all right. Like, it started out being about like truth tables and logical propositions and the kinds of stuff that, you know, it's not too difficult to do. But somewhere between weeks 2 and 4, it just got so unbelievably complicated. Like, it got into this really kind of high-level theoretical math stuff that to this day I don't understand. And it was so intensely frustrating because it was one of those things where it wasn't about not doing the work, it was about literally not understanding. Like, I remember looking at my textbook or looking at the kind of problem sets we'd have to do and literally not understanding anything that was there. Like, looking at things like index values and being like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what to do with that. And really the only way I got through that was by being in a study group with other people and just trying my best. And I got the worst grade I ever got in university in that class, but I did pass, which was very exciting for me because I was not sure I was going to pass. But I think that's where having other people to talk to is really helpful. Even when they can't necessarily explain it to you in a way that you understand, at least being around other people and working through things and seeing that other people are frustrated too was really helpful. And I think also for me it was just accepting the fact that this is over my head. This is just not how my brain works, and that's okay. It's okay. We can't all be high-level logical statisticians or whatever.